The story of Vincent de Paul begins in 1581 in southwest France in a small village called Pouy. Then, as now, it was a forgettable and forgotten corner of the country. Vincent's rather nondescript homestead at Pouy exhibits the plainness and poverty we tend to associate with saintly beginnings. What marks Vincent off from many of his fellow canonized is the fact that at a very early age he decided that the lowly and precarious life of a peasant was not for him.
I often saw them return from the fields, quite worn out, their clothes muddy and bedraggled. Yet, if the weather took up or they were told to return to their tasks, they were off again at once, silent and uncomplaining.
Vincent's dream of a lofty lifestyle away from the duress of life in the land would have to wait. For the moment, he had to content himself as a farmer's son at Pouy on the Landes, a flat, marshy and tiresome strip of land where the river Adour floods its banks twice yearly. Religion, like everything else, was simple, confined to the basics. Porridge, bread and local apple cider was his meagre menu. Riding the wild horses of the land, his chief pastime. Ironically, the village which Vincent could hardly wait to leave is now named after him.
It annoyed me the way the locals silently accepted such a lowly lifestyle. My own father was one of them. I can see him making his way through the village, limping, baggy trousers, strong smell, big broad-rimmed straw hat. And there I was too, always a few paces behind him, hoping that no one would take us for father and son. I was ashamed of the man.
Besides the ambition to climb socially, Vincent also had the talent, and his father knew it. He also knew that the best way for a young man such as Vincent to free himself from life on the land was to become a priest. Sending him first to secondary school, he then packed him off to Toulouse to study theology in 1597.
I liked Toulouse. Cathedrals, university, people from abroad. A change from the boring and predictable routine of my hometown, and a chance to set myself on the road to a priestly career, sure and secure. My father came to see me here recently. I told my landlady to tell him I could not see him. My embarrassment at being seen with a raw rustic in a stately town like Toulouse would have been unbearable. He did leave me the price of 2 oxen for my fees, however.
The village of Buzet lies 20 miles from Toulouse, where Vincent was studying. It was to Buzet that Vincent looked to earn a living when his father died. Seminaries didn't exist. Future priests had to support themselves like other university students. So Vincent rented a room in the village and set up a small school, commuting from Toulouse to teach the dozen or so private pupils on his roll. Thanks to the fees he received, he was able to pay for and complete his theology at Toulouse. Then, like all prospective priests, he simply asked a local bishop to ordain him. Since he had the necessary qualifications, his request was granted. So, in 1660, at the ripe old age of 19 and a half, Father Vincent de Paul came to celebrate his first Mass in the little-used church of Notre-Dame de Grace near Buzet, where he was teaching.
I had a congregation of 2, another priest and an altar server. I wanted it that way. There had been a recent church council at Trent which had discouraged ordaining men under the age of 24. At 19 and a half, I was slightly below the limit. I didn't want any publicity.
After this somewhat furtive first Mass, Vincent returned to Toulouse for further studies. A priest without a parish, he still had to take private pupils for income. At this stage, he had neither the reputation nor the influence needed in those days to secure a parish. But his luck changed. An elderly lady in the city left him her inheritance, but there was a snag. It consisted of debts owed to her by some trickster who had fled to Marseille to escape payment. Vincent left Toulouse in pursuit.
Marseille was my first meeting with the Mediterranean. My rather mundane reason for going there stopped me from seeing the real beauty of the port. I was determined to catch the fellow. Firstly, I needed the money. I was a floating priest without a position. Secondly, I was determined that no fly-by-night rogue would swindle me. Priest or no priest, I was determined to get what was rightfully mine. I searched for days along the quays and wharfs, inquiring from fishermen, sailors, and travelers. As luck would have it, a group of fishermen gave me the details I needed to track down my cunning friend. My mission was successful. I recovered my money and my pride. Along the quays, I also learned that it was possible to return to Toulouse by ship. Considering my recent coup, I felt entitled to treat myself to the comfort of a sea voyage for the return journey.
Vincent's return journey to Toulouse from Marseille should have taken a day's sailing. It would take him much longer. The day he sailed, Turkish pirates attacked the ship. The passengers and crew who were not slain were carried off in irons. Instead of a sedate voyage to Toulouse, the somewhat snobbish and self-confident Father de Paul was put up for sale at the slave market in Tunis.
We were stripped naked, given each a pair of trousers, a linen doublet, and a cap. In this rig, and with heavy chains around our necks, we were paraded through the streets of Tunis 5 or 6 times. The buyers examined us, much in the same way as cattle or horses are examined at a livestock fair. I spent 2 years in all as a slave, under 3 masters. My last master was a French lapsed Catholic, whose Muslim wife became fascinated with all I told her about Christianity.
The young priest in rags equally impressed her lapsed husband, so much so that he decided to free Vincent and took him back to France soon afterwards. They landed near Avignon, where Vincent was housed in the Palace of the Popes. 3 centuries earlier, Avignon accommodated the entire papal court of Clement V. It was to be home for a series of popes and anti-popes for most of the 1300s. 300 years later, the ravishing and robust palace was a most welcome change from the ramshackle hovels Vincent had slept in during his 2 years' captivity.
The papal representative in Avignon made quite a fuss over me. A Catholic priest, a slave in North Africa with Muslim masters. He was doubly curious when he discovered I had gleaned some secrets of alchemy from one of my masters. In return for these secrets, I stood to gain an ecclesiastical reference that would make up for all my recent hardship. So, despite a shaky and humiliating start to my priesthood, I felt that I was now launched on a clerical career that was secure and bright.